What is up, my brothers and sisters, my agents of respect? It's your boy Trey Johnson back with another episode of No Disrespect But Podcast. Hope y'all have been enjoying the college basketball conference tournaments that are getting started, not just the P5, but all around the country. Some great conferences. Just finished wrapping up watching LSU in South Carolina. And so shout out to South Carolina for another conference championship. And so now it's going to be time to see how both teams fare in the national tournament. But I'm not here today to talk to y'all about basketball. And before we get started, guess what? Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Always feel free to comment. Just keep those comments respectful. And if you want to support your favorite podcast of yours truly, the link to do so will be in the episode description. So what we talking about today, man, is NFL free agency and the frenzy that always comes with it. And normally, we meet on Tuesdays and Fridays, but with the tampering period, as they call it, where you can begin to reach out to players that aren't necessarily on your team yet and start to talk to them and their agents about contracts, that starts tomorrow. And if it's anything like it's been the past couple of days where there's already been some deals getting done. Chris Jones signing a 5-year deal to return to the Kansas City Chiefs with 95 million guaranteed, basically making him the highest paid defensive tackle in the league and the second highest paid, I think, defensive uh, lineman in the league behind Bosa. So everybody's getting their money. Just saw today Kevin Byard played for the Titans, great safety, got traded to the Eagles, finished the year there, and just signed. He got cut, and then he just signed a 2-year deal with the Chicago Bears. Uh, Mr. Trubisky, albeit he's a backup, signs a deal with the Buffalo Bills. So we're kind of starting to see some folks that got cut early before the league year that got to sign a little bit earlier than most. And March 13th is actually when the new league year begins and when you can officially start to sign. But tomorrow, being March 11th, is when teams, like I said, can start to talk to players, talk to agents, and try to get some deals done. And so I didn't want to be a day late and a dollar short. So I wanted to kind of get this out now. Am I going to talk about every single free agent? No. And I'm not going to talk about teams specifically. Of course, I would love to talk about who I would love the Saints to bring in or the Giants to bring in. But to be quite honest with you, I have no idea how much money each of those teams are going to be working with, how they're going to value free agency as opposed to the draft. Because sometimes you can get some guys cheaper in the draft from a depth perspective. And so that could be some things that teams like to go. But what I want to do is I want to talk about some key free agents that I really like at each kind of position group. So we're talking about quarterback, running back. I did pass catchers, so wide receivers and tight ends kind of grouped together, offensive linemen grouped together, D line grouped together, linebackers and defensive backs. And so I'm going to highlight some players in that category that are going to be free agents, and that will be able to begin talking to teams. And look, I'm going to make some predictions about where I think they might go. I could be completely wrong, but it's some places that I would like to see some of these players go and have an opportunity to further their career. And so we'll see how it goes. And of course, I want to start with the most important position in football to some, that being the quarterback position. And so a guy that really stands out and is probably the top quarterback, free agent quarterback on the market, that is my guy, Kirk Cousins. Formerly of the Minnesota Vikings. So now he's going to be unrestricted free agent. He can sign anywhere that he wants to. Kirk is coming off a serious Achilles injury. Got hurt kind of mid-season last year, and he was on a tear. Had 2,300 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 5 picks. And if you guys remember, I had him tapped to win the league MVP, and I truly believe that if he doesn't, pop his Achilles, I think the Minnesota Vikings finished with a top 2 seed in the NFC, and I think Kirk Cousins gets a lot of votes and probably gets the votes needed, right, to be league MVP because he was kind of leading the NFL in a lot of categories at the time of his injury. Um, Now, the potential destinations, I think we know two of them for sure. That being Minnesota, that's still on the table, him being able to return and finish his career out at Minnesota. I think he's 35 years old, so obviously not a whole lot of time left in this league. But also Atlanta has come as a serious, serious contender. And some are predicting that as soon as tomorrow, we will hear that Kirk Cousins intends to sign with the Atlanta Falcons to be their starting quarterback for the next couple of years or so. A team I wanted to throw in there as well is maybe a potential return to Washington. Now, with having the second overall pick, I would have to assume that Washington is going to go the route of drafting a young quarterback and just rebuilding from there. But knowing that they have some veterans, especially on that defense, that have talked about winning and wanting a chance to go to the playoffs and compete for titles, well, I think Kirk Cousins is a guy that can do that for you. He did it while at Washington. I mean, he was able to get them to the playoffs rather consistently towards the end of his tenure, but we knew they kept franchise tagging the guy, wouldn't sign him to a long-term deal. And so at his first chance, he left in free agency. And at that time, signed the largest contract ever in terms of guaranteed money for a quarterback when he went to Minnesota. And he's been a godsend for that franchise. I don't know if they had gotten everything they wanted. Granted, without him, the year before they got him, and with Case Keenum, they went to the NFC Championship game, and they have yet to equal such success with Kirk Cousins at the helm. But at the same time, I still think that while Case Keenum might have been a lightning in a bottle during his tenure, I think Kirk Cousins has made them the model of consistency at the very least, and having a chance to get to the postseason and compete for Super Bowl. So we'll see if that happens. But again, his wife is a native from Atlanta, and that could be a chance for her and him and the family to be closer to their family. So who knows what's going on in the Cousins household and their mindset or what's going to be the best for them. But if I had to guess, I believe that in the night of the hour, there will be Atlanta will really be pushing hard to get Kirk Cousins in their building. But I believe that Minnesota will say the magic words: 2-year deal, fully guaranteed. And I'm not sure that any team outside of Minnesota would give him that. But I think they trust their doctors. I think they trust his rehab process. I think they trust him as a leader of their franchise. And we know the relationship that he has with Justin Jefferson, another guy that's probably about to reset the wide receiver market in terms of contract, right? But will he want to reset that market in Minnesota if his main guy is not there and Minnesota wants to kind of go with a rookie quarterback instead of Kirk Cousins? I'm not so sure. So this might be, yes, a move to keep Kirk Cousins, but I think in the grander scheme of things, it's a move to keep Justin Jefferson happy. So we'll see how that goes. But if I had to predict, I know Atlanta's really hot right now, but I think Kirk ends up staying in Minnesota and finishing his career out because I just think they're going to make him an offer that he doesn't want to refuse. He's been there a long time. They believed in him. I think they still believe in him. Yes, they might still very well draft a quarterback, but then that guy won't be forced into the starting lineup and having to build on what Kirk has been able to do at that quarterback position for the past few years. So the second guy I'm really thinking about is Ryan Tannehill. Again, an older guy, 36 years old or 35 years old, but I think he'll be 36 by the time the season rolls around. I do think his starting days are over. He's had back-to-back injury-plagued seasons with the Tennessee Titans, and I just don't see a pathway really for him to be a starting guy. But he could very well find himself in a situation where he is another bridge quarterback for another year. We've seen that the past couple of years with him kind of being in that bridge role, and so maybe he can find that opportunity as well, or maybe he can go the Andy Dalton route or the Teddy Bridgewater route and just say, hey, I'm a backup and I want to help either the current starter grow, or I want to help a young quarterback coming into this league. I want to help them grow in the offseason and in preparation. And if that means I have to start, the first 3 or 4 or 5 games of the season and stuff like that until that guy gets it, hey, at this stage in my career, I'm happy. I want to be able to do that. And so that could be a possibility. But also he could be looking at some opportunities where, guess what? There's maybe a young guy who isn't doing as well, and they need a veteran push, and maybe that's an opportunity for Ryan to step in and take that job if that younger guy can't handle the competition. And so when I think about some teams to watch with Ryan Tannehill, I definitely want to throw out Pittsburgh with Arthur Smith. Going there as the offensive coordinator, and we know they have a rich history together. I mean, this guy is responsible for the resurgency of Ryan's career, right? You know, he was a first round pick in Miami. That didn't work out. He goes to Tennessee. Is Marcus Mariota's backup? Marcus gets hurt. Ryan comes in, does extremely well. Him and Arthur Smith, as the offensive play caller, have great success together. I mean, there were rumors that Arthur Smith might trade for him last year when he was still the head coach of the Falcons, and if he were to go into this season as the head coach of the Falcons, there were rumors that Arthur might look to bring Ryan Tannehill in. And so knowing the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback situation with Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett being there, you know, first round pick a few years ago and not materializing the way they thought he would. Maybe this situation where Ryan comes in, he knows Arthur Smith's system really well. He pushes Kenny Pickett. If Kenny Pickett does indeed win the job, you have a vet behind him that can continue to teach him. Or if Ryan steps in and you have a veteran guy that can help you win games. Also, some teams are thinking about Seattle, a guy that can be behind Geno Smith. If Geno gets hurt, we know Geno had some injury issues last year. You still get a guy in Ryan Tannehill that has a big arm as well, and so he can get the ball to DK Metcalf and uh, Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think that's how you say it, and Tyler Lockett if he ends up still staying the Seattle Seahawk. So a guy that accepts his backup role, but when called upon, can come in and help steady the ship. I think Seattle's an opportunity for that. I think Detroit's an opportunity where again, I'm 35 years old, going to be 36. At this point, I just want to give my knowledge and be someone that the starting quarterback can sponge off of. And so still having a guy who's relatively young in Jared Goff, who's coming off a great year and what he's been able to do for the Detroit Lions. But you also have a young guy in Hendon Hooker who is coming off a serious knee injury. And, do you want to push him to have to be the second quarterback to Jared Goff? And if something would happen to Jared Goff this upcoming season, Hendon Hooker steps in. Yeah, I mean, you drafted him, I think, in the third round, so you do want to see what you have in a guy, but also it helps to have a veteran in the room. So even if Ryan Tannehill ends up being your quarterback three, he's a guy that can help quarterback coach Mark Brunell kind of get the message to the quarterback room. And so I can see those as opportunities. Now, if I had to predict, I think I'll go with Seattle. And mainly because I really think, from what I'm hearing, I'm thinking that Pittsburgh really, really, really loves Russell Wilson. They had a great visit with him. And so I'm thinking that that's going to be an opportunity that closes. And out of Seattle and Detroit as my two teams to look at, two other teams to look at, I think Seattle presents an opportunity where, hey, it's a new coach and he isn't necessarily beholden, right, to Geno Smith. And so there might not necessarily be a competition, but there may be an opportunity at some point for Ryan Tannehill to have to come in and steady that ship. So who knows how that goes. But I would predict out of those three teams, Seattle probably being a more likely fit in that scenario. And last quarterback I'm thinking about is Jameis Winston. Now, being a Saints fan, we've had this guy for the past 4 years or so, and I think he's been great. He's been a great leader in the locker room, a great leader in the community of New Orleans. And I think in times, I mean, the career in New Orleans didn't go the way I'm sure he wanted to go, the way some of us wanted to go as fans. Injury plagued. His first year as a starter with Sean Payton, off to a great start, 5 wins, or really 4 wins, 2 losses, and on our way to a fifth win with Jameis Winston at the helm at the quarterback position. And then he gets kind of hurt on a horse collar tackle, injures his knees out for the year. Sean Payton leaves, in comes Dennis Allen. And we know that relationship was a little bit rocky, and Jameis had some injury issues, and told that, hey, chill out, get healthy, it's your spot. And then come to find out, no, it was just a ruse to get Andy Dalton into the lineup and ultimately get Jameis out of the building. And knowing some things I know, I think front office didn't necessarily like that and how it happened and wanted that to happen. And so they wanted to give him an opportunity to stay on the team, have an opportunity to heal, and it worked. I think he came into some games, didn't have any starts, but there were some games where Derek Carr wasn't able to finish. And Derek Carr wasn't playing exceptionally well either outside of that Green Bay game. And Jameis comes in, leads a triumphant comeback, and we just fall a little short. And so I would say there were some things last season as opposed to the season before where I think last season he put some good film out, and that was something he talked about, putting out good film and getting healthy. And I think he was able to do that. And I would love to have him back in New Orleans. Jameis is adamant that he wants an opportunity to be a starting quarterback again. And he just turned 30 years old, so I don't blame him for that. And we know, given this current regime, it's not going to happen in New Orleans. And so he should seek an opportunity elsewhere. And so when I think of some teams to look at, I would say um, Atlanta, if they whiff on the Kirk Cousins front, if they whiff on a potential Justin Fields trade, they may want a guy like Jameis Winston who has some familiarity with Raheem Morris, who is now the head coach over there in Atlanta, and they have some weapons there. And Jameis kind of mentioned that him being from Alabama, it's what I think you said it was about 2 hours away from where he grew up, so he would be a lot closer to family than he is, kind of playing for New Orleans and during his time in Tampa Bay or anywhere else he would end up traveling to. But like he says, wherever God leads him and what is in his cards is where he's going to be. But thinking about some teams, like I said, Atlanta would be an opportunity to look at. I think Minnesota, if they miss out on Kirk Cousins and he decides to go to Atlanta, they could be looking, of course, they're going to be looking in the rookie quarterback market, but also then they're going to be looking in the veteran quarterback market. And I think a guy like Jameis can come in. It might not be as ideal for him in the sense of he definitely wants his starting opportunity. But at the same time, hey, take that opportunity to be the bridge guy, and maybe you can hold that rookie off for a couple of years. It happens all the time in the NFL. So, or maybe you're doing your thing for a year or two, and now you get another opportunity, and only 32 years old. So, those are a lot of things that can happen for him. So, I would look at Minnesota as an option, and I I've heard Pittsburgh, but like I said, I'm really kind of under the impression that Pittsburgh is going to go with the Russell Wilson route. But another team I'm looking at is Denver. I mentioned that his first tenure starting with New Orleans was under Sean Payton, and I think Sean Payton did a good job kind of building a game plan around Jameis slowly but surely. And we saw some things in that Tampa Bay game that we probably hadn't seen, the previous 6 weeks where the playbook was starting to open up, and you know Sean is ridding himself of Russell Wilson, and he's looking to revamp his quarterback position. And I could see them still going for a rookie, and kind of like I said with Minnesota, you still kind of want that veteran presence. And a guy like Jameis, who knows Sean Payton's offense at this point, was in it for 4 years, right? And now he gets to play under the mastermind again. It could be an opportunity to maximize his value once again. And so if I had to predict, I think he ends up in Denver. Um, because I do think Sean Payton is going to want to bring a veteran quarterback in, and I think Jameis is just the perfect fit for him. Although I do think they end up drafting quarterback at some point in the first 60 picks or 64 picks of the NFL draft. But I will tell you in my heart of hearts, I have a sneaky suspicion that he will end up in Atlanta. If Atlanta whiffs on Kirk Cousins, it's just something in my spirit saying they're going to end up getting Jameis, and that's kind of goes into the rivalry that Atlanta has with the New Orleans Saints. So that's probably why I got that bug. But those are kind of my three quarterbacks that I'm really looking forward to seeing where they end up. Now going to the running back position. Um, Saquon Barkley, I mean, that's the number one guy for me. Obviously, when healthy, one of the most electrifying players in the league. And at this point, we know his time with New York is done. They did not sign him to a long-term contract extension last year. Actually, franchise tagged him, and you know, I like to say I'm a former Giants fan because Eli's no longer there. I did not like how they treated Eli on his way out, and I damn sure don't like the way they're treating Saquon Barkley on his way out. I mean, you give a guy who only threw for 15 touchdowns, ran for what another nine, I think, and Daniel Jones, you give him $40 million, no hesitation. But your best player on offense, the guy that makes everything run, he can't get a long-term deal with you. That just doesn't sit right with me. So I think he's probably going to be the top running back in this free agency class. I think everybody's going to want to have a meeting with Saquon Barkley. Teams that we're looking at, I mean, everybody's talking about Houston. They have the most cap space, so they can maybe, put a buttload of money or a boatload of money in front of Saquon to where he does play the running back position, and that shelf life is very, very small, and that window of opportunity is very small. So he may take the big money deal in Houston. Obviously, nobody's really talking about it, but I would be a fool not to think that the Philadelphia Eagles wouldn't be a team that approaches him and tries to get him to join what they have. They could definitely take some of the pressure off of him in terms of having to be in everything. I mean, obviously, what Jalen Hurts adds to the running game, they have a great offensive line, although they're losing Kelsey, so we're going to see how they revamp that offensive line. But at the end of the day, I think that there could be a really good opportunity for him just with the weaponry around him. And like I said, just not having to deal with um, as much expectations and responsibilities as he did in New York. And another team I'm thinking about is Miami. It's South Beach. Everybody loves it down there. They're always looking for running backs. Obviously, Achane is probably going to be their feature guy. Mostert, Raheem Mostert has been really good for them during his tenure. But I always think Miami's always trying to get better and always try to add to what they have. And so I could see them wanting to approach Saquon and saying, hey, dude, we have an explosive offense. We have a running back by committee. And what we're really going to need from you is to be that guy that creates explosive plays in the run game. But kind of when we get to late in the year and we know we need to run the ball, we're going to want to lean on you. And so I can see that being an opportunity. Now, if I had to predict, I'm telling you, just much like with the Jameis situation, it's always a player I like going to a team I don't like. And I feel the same way with Saquon. Well, I would love to see him in Houston or Miami, playing with a CJ Stroud or being able to help Tua and his guys out in Miami. I just have a feeling that he's going to play in Philly. I think they're going to make an offer. Probably not as good as some other places, but an opportunity for a championship. They're one of the better teams in the NFC. Opportunity to play with some great and talented players. He's going to be doing that. And then obviously a chance to get back at the Giants twice a year, a team that essentially gave up on you and didn't think that you were good enough to commit long term to. I can see him ending up in Philly, and if I had to predict, I would predict that Saquon will be a Philadelphia Eagle next year. Second guy I want to talk about the running back position is Derrick Henry. King Henry, product out of the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, all-time leading rusher in Tennessee Titans and I guess Houston Oilers history, and you just kind of started to see that while he was still a phenomenal player last year, and I think coming into this year, you could tell that his time was going to be done in Tennessee. They had a new general manager. You could tell he was not going to commit long term to some of the older players on the roster, and that's just ended up being what it is. It's why Ryan Tannehill is going to be a free agent. That's why Derrick Henry is going to be a free agent, and I think that's why Coach Mike Vrabel got let go. So a lot of things we knew that was happening in Tennessee kind of gave us an idea that it was going to be different. Players weren't going to be there, coaches weren't going to be there. And so when I think about Derrick Henry, I think he had a lot in the tank, but I also think he should be in a role where he is no longer having to be the feature back. Kind of similar to Saquon, where I'm saying, hey, you're going to get certain touches, but we're not going to give you 250, 300 touches a game. We're going to utilize you in a way to keep you fresh for postseason success. And we know if you don't bring your run game, your defense with you in the postseason, you're probably not going to be competing for a championship. That's just how it is. And so when I think of some teams to look at, I think he's looking at the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, Lamar Jackson and what he brings, and obviously you got a good offensive line that knows how to push on the defensive line and provide running lanes for their running backs, especially in short yardage situations. You know, Gus Edwards was one of the league leaders in rushing touchdowns last year, and majority of them were from 2 or 3 yards out from the end zone. And so a guy as big as Derrick Henry is probably not having to be, captain save every possession. He can be really useful. And again, you're having a quarterback that can utilize his legs in a championship roster. That's what I believe the Baltimore Ravens are. They have a championship roster, and they made it to the AFC Championship game, and it fell a little bit short of making to the Super Bowl. But they have an opportunity to continue to compete and continue to add talent around Lamar Jackson. And I think adding one of the best rushers in the history of the league, especially right now, would be a good opportunity to do that. Want to add Philly in the mix here. I think they're always looking to improve. Do they need running backs? Really? No, they can just do a running back by committee type of deal. But I think they always want to try to get the best that they can at the positions if they can afford it. And if those players are willing to take those opportunities and maybe take a little less to compete for a championship. And then staying in the NFC East, I think the Cowboys, who are in desperate need of a running back that can kind of carry the load. Yes, Tony Pollard is really good. I know they got another young guy that came on late and was doing some things, but they have really been missing the Ezekiel Elliott effect of what he was in his prime and just being a bell cow and being able to take pressure off of Dak Prescott in the passing game. And I think they're really looking for that. And so I can see Jerry Jones opening up his pocketbook and maybe giving Derek, a short-term deal, but a short-term deal with a lot of money up front, which from a running back position, you love. Now, if I had to guess, I'm going to say that he ends up being a Baltimore Raven. I think just a team that's known for being smash mouth and playing smash mouth football and running the ball. And now they're starting to utilize their running backs a little bit more to keep Lamar Jackson fresh throughout the year. I just think that'll be a great spot for him. But who knows what he ends up deciding ultimately. And then I want to say A.J. Dillon, a guy who played the last 4 years in Green Bay, split carries with Green, and so um, I think he's going to be looking for some opportunities to maybe be a feature back now, or he's gotten some pretty good touches, but I think maybe want to get 200 to 250 touches a year, as opposed to maybe the 150 to 180 touches that he's been accustomed to during his tenure as a Green Bay Packer. I think he's going to be looking for those opportunities. And so thinking about some teams, I'm thinking about New England. I'm thinking about Carolina, who's really desperate for a running game. I mean, yes, they have Miles that they paid last year coming over from Philadelphia, but he hasn't necessarily done. Miles Sanders hasn't necessarily lived up to his contract. Chuba Hubbard, who was a draft pick of theirs a few years ago, has actually kind of taken over that starting running back spot. And so I think they're always trying to add and improve that. And having a young guy like Bryce Young, you want to start to take some of that pressure off of him and not having to make every play, especially so young in his career. And so I think, adding a big bruiser guy like A.J. Dillon that can keep, put you in second and third and manageable and help you out in short yardage situations. I think he's going to get a lot more touches than maybe he got, during his career in Green Bay. And so that could be some opportunities. And so if I had to predict, I would say out of the two, I'm going to go with Carolina. I think mainly because he knows the quarterback that they have in place. I think, Dave Canellis talks about how he's adamant that he's going to run the ball and run the ball and run the ball again. And so I think any running back wants a guy that's going to, give them opportunity after opportunity and not abandon the run, because A.J. Dillon's one of those guys that he's not just going to, he's not a burner. He's not going to make some big explosive play. You got to give him, 15, 20 touches, and he'll wear down the defense. And then in that fourth quarter, we can boogie. So if I had to predict, I would say A.J. Dillon might be a Carolina Panther. So we'll see. Going to pass catchers. So I have two wide receivers and I have a tight end. So I'll start with my wide receivers, looking at a guy like Tyler Boyd, currently plays for the Cincinnati Bengals. To me, one of the best slot wide receivers in the NFL. And I think he can really impact the team, especially with his ability. And he's taking a back seat. You have a guy like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and they emerge as viable passing options. And we know Jamar Chase is probably about to break the bank, much like his counterpart Justin Jefferson in terms of the wide receiver position. And then T. Higgins actually just got franchise tag, so they kind of show that, hey, we at least want to try to figure out how to invest in him. And so I think with if both of those guys get some big contracts, I think Tyler Boyd ends up being the odd man out, especially kind of being the older of the trio and wanting to have an opportunity to maximize his value and as much money as he can possibly make for him and his family to be set for their lives. And so when I think of some teams to look at, I look at the Giants. Obviously, I want to keep the Bengals in there. I think they will at least try to keep him, so I want to keep the Bengals there. And I want to look at New England. I think those are two teams that are looking for, or in between the Giants and New England, are two teams that are really, really looking for some pass catching talent and just need some guys to really help, whether it's Daniel Jones or it's a rookie that they bring in. I think you need to start adding some more talent on a perimeter, and I think Tyler Boyd can be what I like to call a quarterback's best friend. So if I had to predict, I would have him going to the New York Giants. I think they have the capital space or the cap space to make a larger offer than maybe the Bengals want to compete with, and maybe that the New England really wants to commit to. I think you're going to an established offensive system with Brian Daboll. Yeah, Daniel Jones has his bumps and bruises, but I think he's a guy that wants to give his receivers a chance. He just hasn't had the best wide receiver group. And so a guy like Tyler Boyd, hey, you might end up becoming the featured guy just because of your abilities alone and being able to get the ball out quick. And I think there's going to be some things they look at. So I would be interested to see what that looks like, Tyler Boyd in a New York Giants jersey. So if I had to predict, that's where I would have him going. Another guy I want to talk about is Calvin Ridley. Um, Started his career with the Falcons, got in trouble for some gambling issues, had to miss a year, then ends up getting traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Last year was his first year with them, and he was pretty good. He had over 1,000 yards, but he had some costly drops. I think it was 6 or 7 on the year, but he had some costly drops in some big games that would have, that became the difference in them making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. And so, you know, the Jaguars were left with the decision. I think if they had kept Calvin on the roster or re-signed him, they would have to give the Falcons a second-round pick. And I think they're at this point in time where they're trying to maximize their draft picks and things of that nature. And so I don't know if they're going to bring him back. I will still keep them on the radar as a team to watch because they may just bite the bullet. I do think, if you want to maximize the Trevor Lawrence experience, or even now you're bringing in Mac Jones, who you just traded for today, Calvin Ridley is a true wide receiver one. And yeah, he's a little bit older, but we can manage the drops. I think he's a guy that can really help. So you really want to kind of keep him on your radar and consider bringing him back. If I'm the Jacksonville Jaguars, a couple other teams I'm looking at are the New Orleans Saints, the Kansas City Chiefs. We know the Saints. The relationship with Michael Thomas, that's coming to an end. We kind of saw that last year where, pretty much essentially signed a 1-year deal to return to the New Orleans Saints. And I think that year is up. If he's on the roster March 15th, he gets $119 million in bonuses for this upcoming year. We know that's not happening. So they should be looking for more wide receiver talent, more veteran wide receiver talent. And I think with a Calvin Ridley, you get one of the better route runners in the game. And if it's about building up Derek Carr, or maybe if you're drafting a rookie and you want this guy to have some people to play with, obviously having a veteran guy to help continue the professional growth of a Chris Olave and a Rashid Shaheed, Calvin Ridley is a good guy for that. And so when I think about Kansas City, I think of a team, a championship team. Hey, they're not done. They went back to back. Why not three-peat it? And so I think they're going to want to try to look for opportunities to add more to their talent pool at the wide receiver position. And I think a guy like Calvin Ridley and how explosive he can be, he would be a great addition to what they do there. I will say my prediction right now as it stands, I would say he would go to the New Orleans Saints. I think he's going to have an opportunity to step in and be a guy who's playing a bunch of snaps right away, and I think he's going to have his fair share of targets to create even more value for himself. So I would predict that he goes to New Orleans. I would say probably best fit will be Kansas City. And not just because you're playing with the best quarterback in the game right now, you're playing with the best coach and the best offensive mind in the game right now. And you play a position that Kansas City truly needs help in. I mean, they had some makeshift guys, and but when the best player on your team is a rookie, and that's not always a bad thing, but you need to add more depth. You need to add more veteran depth. Can't just rely solely on your young guys to be the guys. Get some vets in there. So I would say the best place for them is maybe Kansas City, but that's likely the best place for anybody who wants to play for titles and have an opportunity to maximize their value, right? But if I had to predict, I think he might be somebody that the Saints really look at bringing in and may have an opportunity to do so. Last pass catcher, I'm gonna go with the tight end position. And I look at a guy like Mike Gesicki. He's a guy, I'm pretty sure you heard the show. I talk about a lot. Loved him since his Penn State days. Always wanted him to be a Saint. Drafted by Miami Dolphins. Things didn't go well there. He did really well, but they didn't, bring him in for another contract. Ends up signing a deal with New England. 2 years there, doesn't really pan out maybe the way that he wants it to pan out. Now as a free agent. And so I don't know if it was just him or if it was New England. We know that they were a shit show in terms of development offensively. So who knows? And I think he's a guy, a big athletic guy, can definitely help you in the red zone, can definitely help you in contested situations, and is really athletic in terms of getting open and creating separation and things like that. So when I look at teams that are always looking for pass catchers, especially at the tight end position, I'm looking at a team like Cincinnati. I'm always looking to add to what they're doing. And let's say you lose a Tyler Boyd, you can utilize a guy like Gesicki in that slot role a little bit more. Arizona, always trying to get some opportunities for Kyler Murray. I know they had a guy that stepped in last year and did really well, but I think you always want to grow and maximize your positions and the players on your team and the talent. And Mike Gesicki is used to playing in kind of a dual tight end role. So, he's a guy that can kind of come in there in Arizona and help their offense flourish. And then I think, Denver Broncos, I think they're always looking, at the Sean Payton offense, the tight end is key. And Mike, while he's not a great run blocker, he's kind of fits that Jimmy Graham, Ben Watson mold that Sean Payton has had a lot of success with in terms of his tight end position. And so if I had to predict, I think the Broncos might make a really good offer to him. And I think he might take the money and the opportunity to play for a guy like Sean Payton and may have some success. Finishing out offense, going with offensive line. And so three guys I got, I have, yes, you can say two guards and a tackle, but all three, well, one's a true tackle and the other two can play guard or tackle, and I love versatility in offensive linemen. So I'll start with my guy, Tyron Smith. Formerly of the Dallas Cowboys, got cut, injury played career, but again, one of those guys that when they are healthy, they are one of the best at their position, and it's just unfortunate that injuries have kind of dampened what maybe a Hall of Fame trajectory that Tyron Smith was on. But I think he's still a guy that has a lot to give at his position, and so when I look at some teams that might be needing. Kansas City, they might be losing a Donovan Smith in free agency, and so bringing in a veteran guy like Tyron Smith wouldn't hurt them at all. I think New England, who's probably going to lose their two starting tackles, both at the left tackle and right tackle, they could be looking at a veteran to just kind of patch that offensive line up until they can truly begin to build that roster back up under coach. And then another team, again, want to put New Orleans in there. I think with Ram over on the right side and him dealing with some injuries, I think even at the left tackle position where you still got Trevor Penning, who's young and learning. We don't know what's going on with Andrews Pete. We don't know what's going to be happening with James Hurst. So that's a guy that can maybe step in, fill in. Yeah, he has some injury issues, but maybe if he can give us maybe push Trevor Penning in the offseason to where maybe Trevor becomes the guy we drafted and traded up the draft for, or Tyron Smith ends up taking in that spot for a little while, and then Trevor can continue to focus on his development without the pressures of having to be in the game. So those are some things I'm looking at. But knowing the money situation and the opportunity to truly start right away, and not necessarily having to compete, so to speak, I would predict that he ends up in New England. I just think they're going to throw a good chunk of cash at him and basically say, "You're our starting left tackle, day one." And I just think that's going to be an opportunity that he's not going to pass up on. Second guy I want to talk about, Andres Pete of New Orleans Saints has been a versatile guy for a very long time. Played left tackle at Stanford, gets drafted by the Saints, plays left guard. Guess what? When the left tackle gets hurt, guess what? We put Pete at left tackle. So, he had a lot of experience playing on the line at both of those positions, and just as recently as last year, right? Trevor Penning doesn't develop the way we want him to develop, and they say, "Hey, Andrews, you're healthy now. We're going to start you at left tackle. Trevor, you're going to be benched." And you know, I'm not the biggest fan of Andrew Speed. I think anybody will tell you that. But I will say, and one of the reasons why I just think, he's a little clumsy. I think he's not the best pass blocker, phenomenal run blocker, and injuries has always been something that's kind of put a damper in his career, but he hasn't made multiple Pro Bowls. Has been a guy on some of the best offensive line units in the NFL. A lot of that is credited to Drew Brees, I think, in terms of his efficiency and how quick he got the ball out, how accurate he was. But that's neither here nor there. But again, he's a guy that can play both positions, and I think he was serviceable last year. Wasn't the best last year at left tackle, but serviceable. Maybe there's an opportunity where he's like, I can maybe go somewhere and compete for the left tackle position. There's more money there than it is at guard. So there's a lot of opportunities for him. So when I think of some teams that he may be looking at, obviously a return to New Orleans is on the table. Like I said, he can be competing with Trevor Penning for the left tackle position. And if, let's say, he loses out, guess what? He can always be our starting left guard, where I think he's done really well, especially in a system where we're going to be utilizing the run game. He could be a real big part in terms of helping us being efficient in that endeavor. Some other two teams I want to look at is Detroit. They're losing their two interior offensive linemen to free agency more than likely. And so that could be an opportunity where he comes in and gets an opportunity to start right away. There's a pipeline between Detroit and New Orleans in terms of the coaching staffs and some of the players. And so that could be another, Saint to Lion type of transaction that happened. And so I could see that being a likelihood. And then I want to throw the Dolphins in here again, a team that could be losing their guard, who I'm going to be talking about in just a second, but also dealing with some, with Teron Armstead. He's their left tackle, but he deals with some injuries, and he did that in New Orleans. And guess what? When he had injuries in New Orleans, guess who stepped up in his position? That would be Andres Pete. And so Andres Pete has a chance, I think. And like I said, I would predict. If I had to predict, I would say Miami would be a really good option for him, just because he can come in. Let's say if this guy I'm going to talk about, Robert Hunt, leaves, he can slide in at guard and start day one, and he can be that swing tackle if, or in nowadays, when Teron Armstead gets hurt, you can kick, Andres Pete out to left tackle and be able to do things like that. So that's kind of my predictions for Andres Pete. And then last offensive lineman I want to talk about is Robert Hunt. Graduated from the Raging Cajuns of Louisiana Lafayette. Was drafted by the Miami Dolphins. Started off as right tackle. Wasn't the best, especially protecting to his blind side. But new coach comes in and says, "Hey, this guy has some athleticism. I want him at guard." He reignites his career, does great at the guard position, and he's a guy that can still at times, if you need me to kick out to tackle, left tackle or right tackle, I can do that. And we love versatile offensive linemen here. So when I think of some opportunities for Robert Hunt, Miami, I just want to put them there because guess what? I talked about how valuable he's been for them. They may want to write that check to keep his services. I think New England, a team that is losing their tackles, losing some of their interior offensive linemen, they could be looking at a guy that they, played against twice a year for quite some time and say, "Hey, he can come in and help us out." We know that the AFC East, they always trade players. This guy plays for the Jets, now he plays for the Dolphins, now he plays for the Patriots, now he plays for the Bills. Those things just kind of happen in the AFC East. And so that could be an option for him, staying within a division but going to New England. And I want to put the Saints on here as well. And look, I'm going to predict that he ends up a Saint. And it's not just the Louisiana connection. I think the Saints truly want someone that can solidify their interior offensive line and maybe potentially, if Ram is truly hurt and can't go, if we have to kick this guy out, then we will. And so the Saints, they value versatile offensive linemen. I think he's a guy that has experience in the system, right? In that Shanahan type system that New Orleans is about to adopt. He's a guy that has that. And I would say he's probably going to be one of those prize free agents that the Saints kind of, pinch their pennies together and they go after. So I like that. Robert Hunt to the Saints. I love that. Now, I'm going to take a little chance to breathe, but want to do defense. And in today's day and age, people act like they don't care about defense. I'm one of those weirdos that probably values defense maybe just a tad bit more than offense. Yeah, the point of the game is to score more points, but you need some guys that can be able to stop the other team from scoring. And so I maybe value defense a little bit more than most. And so I actually enjoy talking about defensive players and where they might be going and the impact that they can have, probably a little bit more, than anybody else. So just in case you forgot, I want to take a pause to break and say, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and please comment. To keep those comments respectful. I always enjoy reading some of the comments that you guys leave and being able to interact with y'all in those things. But okay, let's start defensive line. Like I said, a lot of deals have started to be made earlier. So my top guy, Chris Jones of the Kansas City Chiefs, no talks. I mean, look, the guy has 75.5 career sacks, at 10.5 last year, game record. Guess what? If he doesn't create pressure on Josh Allen, guess what? The Buffalo Bills are going to go to the Super Bowl or have a chance to go to the Super Bowl at the very least. But he was tagged last year by Kansas City, held out the first week. We saw what Detroit was doing to them, running up and down the field, and he was back in action the next week. And so out in my notes, I did say I did think he would resign with Kansas City. I did believe that the Houston Texans and the New England Patriots, knowing what the money they're playing with, I felt that they might be suitors. And given that Chris is a three-time champion, a three-time champion, he might feel like, hey, I done got the rings. I can just make as much money as I want to. Well, now you get a chance to do both. You can still get a chance to win more rings with Patrick Mahomes, and guess what? You're the highest paid defensive tackle in the league. So congratulations, Chris Jones. But man, I'm pissed because you ruined my episode. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the possibility of you going to maybe Houston, but no. So you had to sign the deal early. But no, congratulations to you, Big Money, and congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs because you kept a game changer on your roster, and you're going to have a chance to win multiple Super Bowls because of it. So let me just go to the number 2 guy before he signs somewhere. That'll be Danielle Hunter, edge rusher from the Minnesota Vikings, a guy that, as a Saints fan, I've just been wanting so bad. Like, dude, can we trade for this guy? Like, whatever they want, give it to him. But, he stayed with the Minnesota Vikings, has totaled 87.5 career sacks, actually had 16.5 just a season ago. Will only be 30 years old. So he's kind of in the prime of his career, right? And still wreaking havoc. And when I think of teams to look at, I want to say I do think his time in Minnesota is over. I just think sometimes when you make a person wait too long for their money, they're just not even wanting to negotiate with you anymore. That's just my feelings. And so when I think of some teams to look at, I would say the Saints. I'm always going to put the Saints in there, mainly because they're looking for edge rushers. And while obviously they'll be looking in the draft to fill that position, I think they're also at a point in time where they're looking for some veterans to fill that void as well, and somebody that can play opposite Cam Jordan and maybe give some of the younger guys like Peyton Turner and Isaiah Foskey and Carl Granderson time to continue to develop and become who they were drafted in Carl's case, re-signed to be. I want to put the Los Angeles Rams because everybody who can rush the passer somehow, some way, ends up on the Rams' radar, and now they're starting to, they got rid of some of the bad contracts. They have their draft picks back. they can look to be spending some money again. I mean, Matthew Stafford's kind of towards the end of his career, and I think, I don't think they did all they did to get him to just get one Super Bowl, just get a crack at one Super Bowl. I think they want every opportunity and to maximize every opportunity. So I think they're about to go all in again, kind of how they did a few years ago when they got Matthew Stafford and got a Jalen Ramsey. Did kind of a mini rebuild the past couple of years, and now I think they're ready. And so I think they're going to be throwing money at some guys, and Danielle Hunter might be one of those guys to pair with Aaron Donald and just wreak havoc on opposing offenses. Another one I heard, I didn't really think about it, but I was reading on them, and I heard this: the Bears, and kind of being the Bears being a team that has some money to play with and will overpay you. And so folks were saying, yeah, Daniil might just say, hey, I want that money. And at 30 years old, probably having 4 or 5 years left, maybe 3 at a high level, at the level he's playing at, he might say, hey, I'll just take the money right now. But I personally will crystal ball him to the Rams for now, just because I think having a chance to play with an Aaron Donald, you just don't always pass up on those opportunities. I think they have the money. It's LA, which I'm pretty sure is a step up from Minnesota. And, just an opportunity to maybe compete for a championship again, and then playing with the generational talent on the interior defensive line. But I will say, knowing what I know, he is indeed a priority for the New Orleans Saints. They would love to have him, but they will not break the bank to get him. And I think that being the case, we won't get him. I would love to, but I think if we get him, it's because he truly wants to, return to Louisiana where he went to college at LSU, and maybe have an opportunity to compete or help them compete for a championship. But if it's money related and location related, I don't think he passes up the Rams offer in LA. We shall see. And closing out the defensive lineman, I want to mention Bryce Huff, who's coming from the New York Jets, had 10 sacks a season ago, only 26 years old. So when I say, when people have been talking about edge rushers and free agency, in my mind, especially for the Saints, I was saying, hey, man, excuse me, get some of these younger guys. Get some of these younger guys that are, 24, 25 years old, something like that, and give them that opportunity to do well. And then guess what? They do well on a 3-year contract. You sign them to even bigger deal at 29, 30, and you have them for another 4 years or so. So one of the upcoming, and rising players that are doing really well. When I look at some teams, especially teams that want to spend some big money, I already talked about some AFC East guys jumping ship, staying in the division, going to another team. And so I want to put New England in there. All reports are saying they are going to be big spenders in free agency. And so why not? Why not spend money on a young guy, especially in Gerard Mayo's new system and his new regime? Why not get a guy that can create havoc? Everything they build is going to be on defense first. We know this. And have a guy who's hungry, wants to prove himself, and maybe has a chance to play his former team twice a year, a team that didn't necessarily believe in him to sign him to a long-term contract. So also looking at Houston, another team willing to pay some money, a guy in D'Amico Ryans, probably should have won Coach of the Year last year. A guy that's going to pride himself on defense, always being able to attack the quarterback position. That might be a destination, and I'm always going to I put New Orleans on there, but the more I thought about it, I wasn't so sure, and I just decided to replace them with Philly, because why not? Philly, they just, I mean, you never understand how they find the money or why they're even considering these players, because they have edge rushers galore, they have defensive linemen galore, they have offensive linemen galore, they have wide receivers galore. They might even sign a star quarterback just because they can. So I'm always just going to put Philly on this list because somehow they find their way into the game. But, this time I'm not going to predict a player to go to Philly. I'm going to predict this player to go to Houston. I think Houston, obviously, they can still, bring Grenard back. I think they still might do that. And obviously, you got Will Anderson as a pass rusher on the opposite side, too. But you can't have enough pass rushers, right? And I think they have the money to be able to expend on that position and be okay, especially with Will being on a rookie contract. So I can see him ending up in Houston. We want to talk about, got 2 position groups left. We want to talk about linebacker and DB. And so the guys that picked out the linebacker position, I have some guys that started elsewhere, had some pretty decent careers, but their time is ending, and they want an opportunity to showcase their skills elsewhere and maybe have opportunities to start. And so a guy I think about first is Patrick Queen, out of LSU, currently playing for the Baltimore Ravens. And like I said, he had a decent career, but there were definitely some murmurs of him not being the guy to get the job done. Maybe one of the reasons why the Ravens went out and traded for Roquan Smith. But I think the two of them have been great partners. I think they play well together. Difference is Roquan makes a lot of money, and they just signed their star defensive tackle to a lot of money. And what that means is there's not a lot of money because they also just signed Lamar Jackson to a large contract the year before. And there's only so much money you can pay. And I don't know if you're going to have two high-priced linebackers on your roster just because I think the money's tied up. And so when I look at some teams, I look at the Washington Commanders, and a guy like Dan Quinn loves the linebacker position. Is truly the definition of what it means to be a part of that system. You want solid guys to the linebacker position. You want a solid edge rushers or solid pass rushers, and you want big and long, balls, uh, cornerbacks that can make life difficult for wide receivers on the perimeter. And so I think that could be a good opportunity for Patrick Queen to just revamp his career, be kind of the star guy again. I'm at that position. I think New England, again, I just think they're wanting to add to their defense. They have the money and the capital to go after some guys. I think that's an opportunity. And then I think there's an opportunity within the AFC North if he wants to go to Pittsburgh, a place known for having generational linebacker talent. And it's kind of been dampened the past few years. He could be a guy to bring that back, to bring that aura of the Pittsburgh still a linebacker back. But if I had to predict, I'm going to go Washington. I just think the reputation that I would say the reputation that Dan Quinn has and how his former players have spoken about him. We know how well Patrick Quinn can also blitz the quarterback as well. I just think that's a great opportunity for him to resurrect his career and get some money in the process. Another guy I'm thinking about, Devin White, who I really shouldn't be talking about because he's the reason that kind of hurt the Saints' chances a couple years ago and pretty much put everything downhill. Jameis's career as a starting quarterback, Sean Payton's tenure as the New Orleans Saints head coach, all ended with a horse collar tackle. But he still is one of the better linebackers that I've seen in quite a while. Hasn't had some of the same impact the past couple years, and I think a lot of it is, I think he let the outside noise of trade rumors and contracts and stuff like that get in the way. And look, he was asking for a lot of money. I think somewhere north of $20 million to re-sign with Tampa Bay, and they just wouldn't buzz given their cap situation and not wanting to tie up money so much in certain positions. So when I think of Devin White, I just think that his time in Tampa Bay might be coming to an end. And when I look at some teams, I look at New England, Pittsburgh, and Houston. But I don't think Devin's going to get I don't think his market is going to be as strong as we think it is. I think he's a guy that's going to have to take a 1-year prove-it deal. Then have an opportunity to cash back in next year. So when I look at teams that might be into giving him that, I'm going to go with New England here. I just think, Coach Mayo was going to want a linebacker with a little bit of nasty in them, and knowing the quarterbacks in that division, you got to strike some type of fear and have some type of physicality and intensity about yourself. And so I could see New England giving him a 1-year proven deal and him taking that. But I don't think his market is going to be as big as he may have thought it would have been when he wasn't necessarily playing ball with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers during contract negotiations. And last but not least in this linebacker group, I want to talk about Josh Uche. Now, forgive me, Josh, because for some reason I kept saying you play for Baltimore. That is not the case. This guy played for the New England Patriots. I have no idea where I got that from. 18 and a half career sacks. Now he had 11 and a half in 2022, but last year had a down year. That was some injuries and stuff like that. Only had 3 sacks. But I still think this guy is a phenomenal edge rusher. Still young, mid-20s, has a lot to give. And some options I got. I think he could still theoretically return to New England. I don't think Coach Mayo is going to want one of his better guys, especially rushing the passer, to leave. And so they have the money. I think they're going to still negotiate with him, and so that's a possibility. Miami, again, we talk about they're going to need some edge rushers, some difference makers. Bradley Chubb, excuse me, is going to be coming off a serious knee injury, and so they're going to need somebody maybe opposite him, or maybe somebody that can maybe early in the season create some havoc while Bradley gets healthy and there's not as much pressure on him, right? But another team I want to talk about, New Orleans Saints. And I know you're saying, "Oh, Trey, you keep bringing up the damn Saints." Everybody ain't go to the damn Saints. Only reason why I'm bringing up the Saints, assholes, is because they actually tried to trade for him last year, and the trade fell through, which kind of pisses me off because it's like, if New England doesn't re-sign the guy, right? Why the fuck you didn't just trade him to us? You could have got a draft pick out of it. But anyways, I think he was a guy that was high on the Saints' radar. Obviously, edge rusher was a need for them. Yes, they're looking, at the draft market, but I also think there are some young vets like a Josh Uche, that would be great. And so I'm going to crystal ball into New Orleans, one, because there has already been vested interest there, enough interest to where the Saints were willing to offer a draft compensation, which they don't even fucking have. So, I'm going to go with that. And then last position group, going with DB. I think I got two safeties and a slot corners, and that so um, I just like those positions. And so I'm going to start with Justin Simmons. Actually, was just recently released by the Denver Broncos. Had 70 tackles last season, I believe it was. Yeah, 70 tackles last season. And has 30 career interceptions. A guy I think you would call a ball hawk. And I think in this day and age, especially when you have such physical cornerbacks and you're always trying to get pass rushers that got that quick twitch and get to the quarterback and force him into mistakes, you need a guy at the safety position that can be somewhat of a ball hawk. And so when I think of him, I want to put New Orleans on there again. They got rid of Marcus May. And I think they're going to be looking for somebody that they can put on the back end, and that could end up being Jordan Howden. That could be Lonnie Johnson Jr. But it could be a guy in Justin Simmons who has a great relationship with Tyrann Mathieu, who just re-signed with the New Orleans Saints on a 2-year contract extension. And he's a guy that could be really, really helpful for the cornerbacks in terms of allowing them to be a little bit more physical, because if they get beat, they have a guy who has a great range on the back end that can really cover their ass. So got to put the Saints there. Always going to put Philly there because, like I said, they always find a way. Like, I didn't even think that they'd be able to trade for Kevin Byard, and they did. So I'm always going to put Philly on there. Somehow they get a player. And I'm going to put Green Bay. They're looking for kind of a star at that safety position. They haven't necessarily had that in quite some time. And so they're going to look there for it. But my prediction, I'm going to put them in Philly. They just got rid of Kevin Byard. They still need a safety. It's not like they have somebody that can replace, that can just step in Kevin Byard's place. I think they're going to get a guy like Justin Simmons. That's a ball hawk. They're going to address their defensive line. They're going to address their linebacker position, whether that be the draft or free agency. And I think they're going to want to ensure their back end with some guys that they know that can create turnovers. And Justin Simmons happens to be one of those guys. So if I had to predict, I'm going to go with Philly on this one. Now I want to go to that slot corner I was telling you about, Kenny Moore out of Indianapolis. To me, he's the best slot corner in the NFL. He actually had 3 interceptions last year. I think 0 the year before and 5 the year before that, where he actually made the Pro Bowl. But one of the best. And look, when I look at teams, I'm looking at Indianapolis. I think there's a possibility for a return there. New England again with the money. He actually, ironically, he was undrafted, signed when New England was cut, then signed with Indianapolis, and he's made a stellar career for himself. And I think Houston, they're trying to get guys to work with Sting. And I think if you get one of the best slot corners in the game, you got Sting on the outside. Maybe you draft the guy, maybe you trade for Marshawn Lattimore. I don't know. All right. Or maybe a L'Jarius Sneed. Who knows? Um, that could be an opportunity right now. If I had to guess and predict, I'm going to say he stays a Colt. I just think, he's carved out a great career for himself there. I think they value what he brings to the table. And I just don't see them letting him leave. But if he were to leave, I would predict that he goes to Houston. So I think they're going to throw the money at him, and I think they are able to shore up a part of their secondary to really go along with Devin Stingley Jr. So, or Derek Stingley Jr. My apologies. So we're looking forward to that. And my last player at the DB position, another safety, but also last player I'm going to talk about, Xavier McKinney, Roll Tide, baby. Out of the University of Alabama, one of the best young safeties in the game. Dealt with some injury issues a little bit earlier, but actually played all 17 games last year, had a career high, 116 tackles. And so when I think about some teams to look at, I would say, keep the New York Giants on the radar. I think when a guy has a stellar year like that, you're not just wanting to give up on them. But I think what happens is they're like, we're probably not going to offer as much as you think because guess what? You did have 2 years of injury. So out of 4 years, you had two really good ones and then two ones hurt by injury. So do we want to commit a lot of, financial, uh, things, financial commitments to someone that we got to make sure is healthy, right? And can play back to back seasons and things like that. But then you got a guy who's like, hey, I just had a great freaking year, right? Like, pay me my worth. So there could be an opportunity where they find a middle ground. Just want to give him an opportunity to seek his value. So I would always put the Giants there. Then I want to kind of stay in the state of New York and look at Buffalo. They just cut their two starting safeties from a season ago, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. So they're going to be looking at a safety. You can get young guy, Xavier McKinney, who can kind of help shore up one of those safety spots for you. And then I want to look at the Rams, right? Again, them kind of like Philly, but more so now because they've gotten rid of the bad contracts, so they have some money to play with. They are trying to get younger on defense, and so that can be an opportunity to shore up that safety spot and continue the youth movement while also getting quality vets in certain areas for them to compete for championships again. Like I said, I think he stays with New York. But I would look at two teams, and one of the teams I want to mention, I didn't even mention in the first three. I would look out for the Rams for some of the things I said. I think they're still trying to get young. He'd be a great addition to their team, right? But also a dark horse candidate would be the Green Bay Packers. Their defensive pass game coordinator was the defensive backs coach at Alabama during Xavier's time there. And so that could be a pitch there. And again, they're looking to shore up their safety position. So we shall see. But I just think he's going to stick with the Giants. I think they're going to find a middle ground. I think they're going to see what his market value is. And I think they're going to come to an agreement. So those are my free agents that I like. But as always, man, I hope y'all enjoy the show, and I want y'all to make sure y'all comment some of the free agents that y'all looking forward to seeing, and let me know what y'all think y'all going to sign. I want to kind of have these conversations in the comment section. I look forward to having these dialogues. So feel free to shout out. So whether you want to do it on the YouTube channel, whether you want to do it on the Twitter page at But Disrespect. I would love to kind of have this conversation with you guys and pick your brain on who you're excited to see and who and what you want your favorite team, who you want your favorite team to go after. But tomorrow, man, the madness truly begins where our unrestricted free agents get a chance to say, hey, am I going to stay or am I going to go? And there's going to be a lot of fan bases that are happy. There's going to be a little bit of sadness because you're going to be losing some guys that you got accustomed to seeing for some time. And I will say this. At the end of the day, remember that these guys are human beings. There's going to be some guys that are leaving places they've been their whole career. And so we got to give them that grace. Whatever they decide to do, show those guys love because their decisions aren't made lightly. And we just got to respect what they brought to us during their time here and just wish them the best wherever they go. And for our teams, God, no disrespect, but just please get the signings right. If you're a fan like I'm a fan, especially of a team that can have some whiffs in free agency, all you can do is just pray to the Lord above that they get it right. So enjoy it, rejoice in it, have some fun. It's going to be a wild free agency, probably one of the best we've had in quite some time, just with the unpredictability that's going on. Got a lot of great players at a lot of different positions. And the one thing I love about the free agency, right, is that it kind of gives us a framework and idea of what the NFL draft may look like. There might be some positions that we thought were a surefire go, probably not so much anymore. So take fun in it. Let's just consider the process and let's keep it going from there. Now, if there's anything that I said that offended anybody, it's a good thing. It's an opportunity for me to learn. It's an opportunity for you to teach me. All I ask is that you keep it respectful. Peace.